Wife continues supporting her ex-offender nephew, prioritizing family loyalty over our marriage and ignoring the threat to our niece's safety. I'm a man who married into a family with more dark secrets and baffling loyalty than I ever could have imagined. My wife, let's call her Jay, is 51. I've been married to her for 13 years, and from the start, I could sense something was off in her family. It all truly came to a head when I met her nephew, SMF. From the very first moment I encountered SMF, a man now in his early 40s, my instincts screamed at me to keep my distance. Just being around him made my skin crawl, though at that point I couldn't pinpoint why. He was in his late 20s when we met, couldn't hold a job, mooched off the family, and had this disconcerting dullness in his eyes, not quite mentally challenged, but just slow. He didn't receive the social security benefits someone with a true disability would in our district, so he wasn't officially recognized as such. Yet his entire existence was a lesson in getting by with the least amount of effort, propped up by the kindness, or perhaps negligence, of those around him. Through Jay and her stories, I learned SMF was essentially abandoned as an infant by his teenage mother, Jay's half-sister, who dumped him on their own mother for raising. His biological mother went on to have 2 more daughters and, to this day, neither she nor those daughters want any involvement with SMF. Not a word had ever been said about who his father might be. SMF's grandmother, my wife's mother, raised him as her own, even going as far as having his name engraved as her son on her tombstone instead of her grandson. Jay always painted him as a victim, a sweet person who wouldn't hurt a fly, someone who only went astray because life dealt him a cruel hand and everyone picked on him. I got so tired of hearing that refrain, he never had a chance, everyone felt so sorry for him. The family, in my estimation, babied a capable adult man who could support himself, but never did. Even his home, a trailer on a patch of land, was provided by family, and the land actually belonged to my wife. Groceries? Someone always took care of that for him. The internet and the local rumor mill told a different story. Jay would grumble for days about having to disinfect her computer from spyware after SMF visited. Porn sites galore, she'd say with an annoyed shake of her head. In my hometown's online forums, people openly called him out for asking preteen girls inappropriate questions about their bodies. When I confronted Jay about these things, she'd brush it off, say it was just more bullying, more lies against poor SMF. Understanding Jay's family required a new kind of logic. They act purely on emotion. Her father, for example, was an infamous drunk and abuser, disappearing for stretches, stealing, even burning a car for insurance. And yet, after her mother finally divorced him, she remarried him years later, only to suffer the same torments until another separation. It was as if reason never stood a chance against misplaced compassion. There was something else nagging at me. SMF's features, his whole demeanor, reminded me of Jay's father. Was I imagining things? After both of Jay's parents had died, her half-brother paid us a visit. Jay's father came up in conversation, and things heated up until, out of nowhere, her half-brother blurted out a truth I hadn't expected. Jay's dad had raped his own stepdaughter, SMF's mother. Suddenly everything fell into place, the inexplicable pity for SMF, his mother's abandonment, the coldness from his half-sisters, the family's deep-seated hatred of Jay's dad, and even the way the grandmother saw SMF as her own child. This was a family curse, a web of secrets left to fester for decades, all while SMF's existence was a daily reminder. In those rural, isolated backwoods, justice was a fantasy. His mother had no means of support and no recourse. Her mother, Jay's mother, would never have reported the abuse, she'd have shut down the way Jay does now when confronted by ugly truths. For years, Jay refused to talk about the rape, shutting down, blank-faced and silent, whenever I brought it up. The first response I ever got was, he was so drunk, he thought she was my mom, his wife. That's still rape, I pointed out. The second time, it flipped too, my half-siblings just say that. It never happened. Denial, avoidance, a family pattern. Then came the call, SMF had been arrested. We weren't at the hearings, but Jay's brother was. He told us SMF had carried on some online relationship with someone he thought was an 11-year-old girl. The girl's mother caught on, took over the conversation, and trapped him. SMF exposed himself on webcam. The judge, exasperated, asked SMF what his problem was, and SMF just replied, I ain't got no problem. The judge let him have it. What floored me, though, was how the family, all of them, including Jay, who worked with lawyers for nearly 20 years, scrambled to defend him. The family lawyer tried to plead for leniency based on his difficult childhood and constant bullying. None of them seemed fazed by what he'd actually done. They talk about welcoming him home when he gets out, as if nothing is wrong, as if there aren't new children in this family, ready to play on the floor and unburden their secrets to a man no one wants to see for who he truly is. And here I am, left to wonder if I'm the only one seeing the storm that's coming the moment he's released, a storm the family's been brewing for generations. I used to work as a prison guard in a supermax facility for 2 years, so I've seen just about every type of criminal imaginable. Most of them insist they've done nothing wrong, they claim they don't deserve their punishment. And I've noticed that 95% of the time, all prison teaches them is how not to get caught next time and how to manipulate people, especially women, into giving them money. But nothing boils my blood more than sex offenders, especially those who prey on children. This particular resentment is personal. As a child, I was victimized by an adult I trusted. Others in my family were aware of the abuse but did nothing. I saw it happen to others, too, but at that age, I couldn't fully understand what was going on. All I knew was that it felt wrong. Nobody ever supported me, and justice was a foreign concept. So you can imagine how my disgust toward people like SMF has morphed into outright hatred. SMF, he's 6 feet 5 inches, over 300 pounds, tried every sob story he could, hoping for sympathy. He'd talk about dropping out of high school, how his mother didn't want him, anything to get people to feel sorry for him. But based on everything I know, and my own instincts, I doubt very much he was bullied. Far more likely, he creeped on girls at school, asking them inappropriate questions, and when people called him out, that's what he calls bullying. Well, the courts didn't buy his act. He got convicted on 2 counts of taking indecent liberties with children, and 1 count of using communication systems to facilitate certain offenses involving children. 10 years in prison, the maximum, and supervised probation for life. Now he's a registered sex offender. At home, this has led to enormous strain. My wife, his aunt, started sending SMF money at his request. He claimed he needed it for special shoes. I knew right away this was a lie. Everything an inmate needs is provided: 3 meals a day, clothing, shelter, even medical, dental, and optometry care. If they really need something special, they're issued it. More likely, he just wanted cash to make prison life cushier, and I knew from inside that inmates make a game out of how many women they can manipulate into sending them money. She sent it anyway. I later discovered she was regularly sending him money. I insisted she stop. When I asked why she kept sending it, she said he needed it for calls, that it might make his sentence a little easier, or go towards restitution. She kept repeating that her mother would have wanted her to do this. My frustration exploded. I reminded her about my own history, that I'd been victimized as a child, and asked how she could justify supporting a child predator. She fell silent, shut down, but I was too angry to stop. I told her SMF has a mother and 2 half-sisters. His own family should be dealing with this, not her. Paying restitution is his responsibility. Helping with it sends the message that what he did isn't really wrong. I laid it out. If we'd had a daughter, and someone like SMF had done the same things, would she feel sorry for him? Would she want to help him? Or would she want his head on a stick? By comforting SMF now, she was ignoring the reality of his crimes. She argued the judge was just trying to make an example of SMF with the maximum sentence. I simply told her, the judge sees these cases every day. He gave the max because he believes that without close supervision, SMF would do it again. I pointed out that people who get caught are rarely first-timers. He's likely done worse before, but finally got caught this time. I asked her, what if that little girl had lived closer? What if he'd actually gotten to her? Is it so far-fetched to think he might have assaulted her? Both my wife and I hold classified clearances for our jobs. So, not only is she putting her clearance at risk by supporting a felon, a sex offender, a child predator, but she's putting mine on the line, too. What happens if an investigator sees money transfers to a prison account? What does that say about her judgment, about her ability to keep our lives secure? And if I claim I didn't know, it looks like I'm not aware of our finances, that I have no grip on what's happening in my own house. Either way, it's bad. She finally agreed to stop sending money, but I suspect she did it just to shut me up, not because she really saw my point. She made me promise to stop talking badly about him, but I'd never said anything about him that wasn't verifiably true. I told her I didn't want his name spoken around me. I also reminded her he still had the means to contact her. Prisoners get a few free calls a month, and he sent letters before. If she mattered to him, he'd find a way to talk to her. I reminded her how, when we got married, SMF didn't even bother attending because he wanted to watch TV. That should show her just how important his family really is to him. After she finally cut him off, the call stopped. He never wrote again. She hasn't given him a cent since 2019. But recently, my wife's niece told her that SMF reached out through a messaging site for prisoners, jpay.com. She hasn't read the message. I still can't believe someone with his charges can use the internet, but apparently, he can. My wife was never able to have children, a sore subject for her. I believe SMF tries to exploit that, preying on her guilt or emotions, trying to create a surrogate mother-son relationship so she won't abandon him. She swears he's manipulative, but insists he doesn't mean to be, that he isn't trying to control anyone. I told her it doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. She's always said she can't cut people out of her life, but I told her, when someone brings more negativity than anything else, for your own good, you must let them go. He damages her, damages me, damages our marriage, and this is never going to get better. She told me I can't dictate who she has in her life, and I asked why she'd even want someone like SMF in it, knowing the truth. She said she just couldn't turn her back on him and cut him out. I told her that the best thing he ever did for her was leave her alone. All I want at this point is for him to stay in prison for the rest of his life. I told my wife, even if he came out a brain surgeon, nobody would want to hire a child predator. He'll limp through the rest of his miserable life, leeching sympathy and charity from the family, Just like he always has, and I absolutely cannot stomach her giving him a shred of support. Then she told me, once he's released, she intends to visit him. At first, I tried reason. I told her I refused to be under the same roof as him. Then I grew more desperate and said I would never let her be alone with him. The man she knew before he went in is not the same one coming out. He'll return as a convicted felon, a registered sex offender, and a documented child predator. It baffles me to see any of them blinded by love or obligation, but it's like he holds some dark sway over her, mind or heart, something I can't break through, no matter how hard I try. And it isn't just my wife. Her brother and his family act the same way, ready to welcome him home with open arms, acting like nothing ever happened. Since he went to prison, 2 girls have been born into the family, and another is on the way. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if, someday, they let him babysit. 2 of them will be in puberty by then, making the situation deeply troubling. I know how insane this sounds, but honestly, I'd be far more shocked if they didn't leave him alone with them. I can almost hear it now. Oh, SMF loves kids, he'd never hurt them. The thought makes me sick to my stomach. One time, I asked my wife how SMF even has a trailer if he's never able to keep a job. She told me the trailer belonged to her brother, and the land it sits on belonged to her. I have no clue whose name is on the deed or title for any of it. Then, one day my wife told me she needed to talk to me about something important. Apparently, SMF hadn't paid the taxes on the land or trailer in ages, and now that he's behind bars, the property was at risk of being seized for back taxes. I told her straight up, I am not comfortable paying taxes on property SMF had been living in, and would again, for free. I told her I wanted absolutely zero ties to SMF, least of all legal or financial ones. She's often said she inherited the land and had no use for it, so I asked, why not sell it? Why are we paying for something we don't need? She claims she eventually gifted the property to her brother who owned the trailer, but I've never seen a lick of documentation or proof, no tax bill, no assessment, nothing. When I gifted a property I inherited to my own brother, we had to go to a lawyer, sign paperwork, do it all proper and legal. Maybe the land wasn't officially deeded to her, maybe she was just the one stuck with the tax bills. For all I know, it was never hers to begin with. SMF gets out in 2 years. After 10 years of prison, he's going to want 2 things, to get drunk and to get off, and I know he won't care how. Those 3 kids born since he went away will be strangers to him. He won't see them as family. I truly believe they are in grave danger, but no one else seems willing to take the threat seriously or even consider it. The whole family is big on hunting, and I'm sure they'll take him with them as soon as he's free. I've actually considered trying to get a photo of him holding a gun and sending it to his parole officer. I'm guessing his probation will keep him away from kids and internet access, but I guarantee my wife's family will hand him a laptop and a cell phone as soon as he's out. So here's my dilemma. First and foremost, I want to protect these kids from him. Second, I desperately want my wife to understand why she needs to cut him off completely and finally go no contact. And above all, I want him out of our lives forever. Update 1. It's been 6 months since my last post, and I honestly didn't think I'd be back here. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, and this one nearly took my head off. SMF was supposed to serve his full 10 years. That was the only thing keeping me sane, knowing we had time before this nightmare resurfaced. Well, apparently good behavior and some prison program knocked 3 years off his sentence. Jay got the call 2 weeks ago. He's being released in 4 months. The phone call happened while I was at work. When I came home, Jay was sitting at the kitchen table with this strange look on her face, not quite guilty, not quite defiant, but something in between. She told me about the early release, and I felt that familiar rage building up in my chest. But before I could even process that bombshell, she dropped another one. I've been talking to him, she said quietly. For the past year. I just stared at her. What do you mean, talking to him? Turns out, she'd been using that JPay messaging system I mentioned before. Not just reading his messages, actively communicating with him, sending him messages, photos of family gatherings, updates about everyone's lives. She'd been living a double life for over a year, and I had no clue. You promised me, I said, my voice barely controlled. You promised you'd cut contact. Her response? I never promised that. I promised I'd stop sending money. Technically, she was right. And that technicality felt like a knife in my back. She'd been playing word games while I thought we were on the same page about protecting our family, protecting our marriage. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what she told me next. He knows about your history, she said, not meeting my eyes. My blood went cold. What history? About what happened to you as a child. I told him you'd been abused, and that's why you're so hard on him. I've never come closer to walking out of a marriage in my life. She had taken the most painful, private part of my past, something I'd shared with her in confidence during our most intimate moments, and weaponized it to gain sympathy for a child predator. She'd thrown my trauma under the bus to make excuses for his crimes. I couldn't even speak. I grabbed my keys and drove around for 3 hours, just trying to process the betrayal. When I came back, she was crying, but I was past the point of caring about her tears. How could you? Was all I managed to say. She tried to explain that she thought if SMF understood why I was so angry, Maybe he'd understand it wasn't personal. That maybe we could all find a way to coexist when he got out. Coexist? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jay, he's a convicted child predator. There is no coexisting. That's when she finally admitted what I'd suspected all along. She'd never truly believed he was guilty. Deep down, she still saw him as that abandoned little boy everyone picked on. She'd convinced herself the charges were overblown, that he was just confused or lonely, and that prison had probably fixed whatever was wrong with him. The next few days were hell. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was like we were speaking different languages. She kept saying I was being unreasonable and holding grudges. I kept trying to explain that child safety wasn't about grudges, it was about reality. Then, last Friday, her niece called. The one with the 2 little girls I mentioned before. Apparently, Jay had been talking to her about SMF's release, and had suggested that maybe it was time for the family to give him a fresh start. Her niece was horrified. She told Jay in no uncertain terms that SMF would never be welcome around her children, and if Jay couldn't understand why, then maybe Jay shouldn't be around them either. That call shook Jay more than anything I'd said. The possibility of losing access to those little girls, the closest thing she has to children of her own, finally made her realize the choice she was facing. But instead of choosing the kids' safety, she's chosen to be angry at everyone who's forcing her to pick sides. She's angry at her niece for threatening her. She's angry at me for not supporting her. And somehow, she's not angry at SMF, the person who created this entire mess by committing crimes against children. We're sleeping in separate rooms now. She's been researching apartments, claiming she needs space to think. Part of me wonders if she's planning to move closer to wherever SMF ends up living. I called a lawyer yesterday. Not to file for divorce, not yet, but to understand my options. I also want to know if there's any way to legally protect those kids in the family, though I suspect there isn't much I can do. The lawyer told me something interesting, though. If Jay does leave and ends up financially supporting SMF again, and if our names are still on any joint accounts or property, I could potentially be considered complicit. My security clearance could be at risk just by staying married to her. I never thought it would come to this. 13 years of marriage, and it might all come down to whether my wife chooses a child predator over everyone else in her life, including me. SMF gets out in 4 months. Jay keeps talking about him like he's coming home from college, not prison. And me? I'm starting to think the only way to protect myself and those kids is to make sure I'm as far away from this family disaster as possible when he walks free. The worst part is, I still love her. But I'm finally understanding that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the person you love makes choices that are so fundamentally wrong, so dangerous, that staying becomes a betrayal of your own values. I just never thought my wife would be that person. Update 2. I didn't expect to be back here so soon, but the last 3 weeks have been a complete nightmare that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. SMF got out 2 weeks early, apparently some paperwork mix-up that worked in his favor. Jay found out the same day I did, when her brother called in a panic because SMF had already shown up at the trailer. But that's not even the bombshell. The morning after SMF's release, Jay was acting strange, more nervous than I'd seen her since this whole mess started. She kept checking her phone, jumping every time it buzzed. When I asked what was wrong, she claimed she was just worried about how SMF was adjusting. Then her phone rang. It was her niece, the one with the 2 little girls. She was screaming, crying, barely coherent. At first, I thought something had happened to one of the kids. But as Jay's face went white, I realized it was worse. He was here, her niece kept repeating. He came to the house. He knew where I lived. SMF had driven straight from the trailer to her niece's house the night he got out, just showed up at 9 p.m., claiming he wanted to meet his new family members. Her niece's husband answered the door and immediately told him to leave. SMF got aggressive, said he had every right to see his family, and started pushing past him to get inside where the girls were watching TV. Her husband had to physically shove SMF off the porch and threatened to call the cops before he finally left, but not before SMF made it clear he knew their schedules, when the girls got home from school, when her husband worked late, when she was usually alone with the kids. Her niece was terrified. But what she said next made my blood run cold. Aunt Jay, how did he know where we live? We moved here after he went to prison. He's never been to this house. The silence on Jay's end said everything. You told him, her niece whispered. You gave him our address. Jay tried to deny it, but her niece wasn't having it. Through the JPay messages, Jay had been sending SMF photos from family gatherings at her niece's house. Photos where the house number was visible. Photos of the girls playing in a yard that SMF could easily recognize when he drove through town. Her niece hung up, but not before saying something that I know will haunt Jay forever. I trusted you with my children's safety, and you handed it over to a predator. Don't ever contact us again. That's when Jay finally broke down completely. Not because of what SMF had done, but because she realized she'd lost those little girls forever. The closest thing she'd ever have to grandchildren, gone because of choices she made. But it gets worse. 2 days later, Jay's brother called. SMF had violated his parole within 48 hours of release by going to that house. Sex offenders aren't allowed within 500 feet of anywhere children regularly spend time. But here's the kicker, SMF told his parole officer that Jay had assured him the family wanted to see him, that she'd been planning his welcome home visits for months. Jay's brother was furious. The whole family was now under scrutiny from parole officers and social services. And SMF? He blamed everyone but himself, claiming Jay had set him up by giving him wrong information. The manipulative bastard had played her perfectly. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted from her: information, access, someone to blame when it all went sideways. That night, Jay came to me crying, finally ready to admit she'd been completely wrong about everything. She begged me to forgive her, said she understood now why I'd been so afraid. She promised she'd never contact SMF again, that she'd choose our marriage over him. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But then I made a mistake. I decided to trust her one more time. Yesterday morning, I was getting ready for work when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a notification from JPay. A new message from SMF. She was in the shower. I know I shouldn't have, but I looked. The message was short: "Baby, I'm sorry. I messed up. I need you now more than ever. Please don't abandon me like everyone else. Baby." He called my wife baby. When she got out of the shower, I confronted her about it. She swore she hadn't responded to any messages since his release, that she'd been ignoring them. But when I asked her to show me her JPay account, she hesitated. "Show me," I said again. She finally logged in, and my worst fears were confirmed. Pages and pages of messages between them, going back over a year. And the tone. It wasn't aunt to nephew. It was intimate. Emotional. Like she was talking to a boyfriend, not a family member. Messages where she called him sweet boy and my poor baby. Messages where she told him how much she missed him, how empty her life felt without him. Messages where SMF called her beautiful and told her she was the only one who truly understood him. I felt sick reading them. My wife had been having what could only be described as an emotional affair with a convicted child predator. And she'd been doing it for over a year, right under my nose. "It's not what you think," she kept saying, but I'd read enough to know exactly what it was. "I'm staying at a hotel now. Filed for divorce this morning. My lawyer says the JPay messages are enough to show she's been supporting a felon in violation of his parole terms, which could cost me my clearance if I stay married to her. But honestly, the clearance is the least of my concerns. I keep thinking about those little girls, how close they came to being alone with SMF because my wife fed him information. I think about how she threw my childhood trauma under the bus to manipulate sympathy for him. I think about how she chose him over our marriage, over the safety of children, over basic human decency. SMF is back in custody now, violated parole and awaiting a hearing that will probably send him back for the remainder of his original sentence. Jay's family has completely cut her off. She's alone in that house, finally understanding what it costs to choose a predator over everyone else who loved her. Part of me still loves the woman I married 13 years ago. But that woman died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I don't recognize, someone who could look at a child predator and see a victim, someone who could betray her own family's safety for a man who never deserved her loyalty. I'm done trying to save her from herself. Some people can't be saved, and some choices can't be forgiven. This is both.